You ever have one of those moments where nothing makes sense? I just moved here for the quiet. For peace. For the chance to finally breathe. But then, this. I thought it was a fluke. A prank, maybe. But 3 days later, the taps ran dry. They said I broke the rules. That I misused resources. But here's the thing about cutting off a rancher's water. You'd better be ready for what comes next. I'd spent years saving up for this place. A fresh start. No more noise, no more chaos. Just open sky and honest work. But the HOA, they had a different idea of honest. First, it was the garden hose. Then the chicken coop. Then the offensive shade of my front door. But when they came for my water, that's when the war started. I didn't know it then, but that dead fish was a warning. A message. And I was about to send one back. They thought I'd beg. Or leave. But I've spent my life fixing broken things. And this time, I wasn't just fixing for me. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when you push a person too far, and they decide to fight back. I'm Wade. Rancher by trade, stubborn by nature. For most of my life, I'd lived out where the only rules were the ones you made for yourself. But sometimes, life throws you a curveball, and you find yourself trading open fields for cul-de-sacs and cattle for committees. I thought I'd found the perfect place to settle down. A little slice of quiet. Room for my family, a patch for a garden, and maybe a few chickens if the neighbors didn't mind. I value independence, hard work, and the right to live without interference. Turns out, that last one, well, that's where things got interesting. The HOA, led by Karen Templeton, was supposed to keep things orderly. You know, make sure nobody painted their house neon green or parked a boat on the lawn. At first, it seemed harmless. But soon, I realized they wielded their power like a weapon. It started small, notes on my door, warnings about my garden hose, complaints about my livestock. I remember the first letter, your hose is not properly stored. Please comply with community standards. I laughed. I mean, a hose. But then came the next one. And the next. Curtis was my kind of guy. Off-grid expert, tinkerer, and the only person I knew who could fix a solar panel with duct tape and a prayer. We'd swap stories over the fence, mostly about the little things that made us scratch our heads. Like why the HOA cared more about the color of my shed than the potholes in the road. Wade. He's got grit. Most folks just grumble and pay the fines. But not him. He asks questions. He reads the bylaws. And when things don't add up, he doesn't let it go. I joined the board to help the community. But sometimes, it felt like the rules were being used to settle personal scores. Wade wasn't the only one getting those letters. But he was the only one who pushed back, politely but firmly. I started reading the fine print. Garden hoses had to be stored in a certain way. No livestock, unless approved. Noise complaints could be filed for just about anything. The funny thing is, the rules weren't always enforced the same way. Some folks got warnings. Others got fines. And a few, well, they seemed to get away with anything. Karen ran those meetings like a courtroom. If your grass was too long, if your dog barked, if your Christmas lights stayed up past January, she'd know. And she'd let you know. Some folks just paid the fines and moved on. But I started keeping records, photos, letters, even the dates and times of the so-called violations. I figured, if I was going to play their game, I'd better know the rules better than they did. It wasn't just me. The whole neighborhood was feeling it. But most folks kept their heads down. After all, who wants to go up against the HOA? They control the water, the landscaping, even the parking. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I'd always believed in fixing things myself. If a fence broke, you mended it. If a pipe leaked, you patched it. But this was different. This was about control. About who got to decide how we lived, what we could grow, even how we used our water. And then, the letters stopped being about hoses and started being about water usage. That's when I knew, the real fight was just beginning. They said I was using too much water. That I was putting the whole neighborhood at risk. But when I checked the numbers, they didn't add up. My garden was smaller than most. I'd fixed every leak. Still, the warnings kept coming. Curtis. I told him, if they're going to make it this hard, why not go off-grid? Wade just grinned and said, let's do it. Earlene. I started to see a pattern. The same people got the same warnings, over and over. But when I brought it up at the board meetings, Karen would just change the subject. That's when I realized, maybe the rules weren't about fairness at all. I wasn't looking for a fight. But I wasn't about to let someone push me around, either. I started talking to my neighbors, asking questions, sharing what I'd found. Some were scared. Others were angry. But a few were ready to stand up. That was the night I realized I wasn't alone. And that maybe, just maybe, we could do something about it. They say you can't fight City Hall. But what if City Hall is just a handful of neighbors with too much power and not enough oversight? Well, then you fight a little harder. And you make sure you're ready for whatever comes next. One morning, I woke up to find my water supply cut off. No warning, no explanation, just silence from the pipes. I'd never heard a house so quiet. It was like the whole world stopped just to see what I'd do next. My family members, frustrated, kids brushing teeth with bottled water, wife shaking her head, the dog whining by an empty bowl. I checked the meter. I checked the hoses. I even checked the neighbor's yard, just in case. But it wasn't a leak. It was a message. They said I'd violated water usage rules. That I was putting the neighborhood at risk. But the numbers didn't add up. My garden was bone dry. My usage was lower than the average. But the letters kept coming. And now, the water is gone. I called the HOA office, gets put on hold. I called the county, gets transferred. I called Karen Templeton, gets her voicemail. The frustration builds with each unanswered call. I felt powerless. But I wasn't about to give up. I'd spent my life solving problems, and I wasn't going to let a committee of paper pushers take that away from me. I started researching alternative water solutions. I read everything I could find: rainwater harvesting, well drilling, even old-school hand pumps. That's when Curtis introduced me to solar-powered water pumps. If you can't get water from them, he said, get it from the sun. The technical journey begins. I and Curtis surveyed the property, measuring sunlight angles, checking soil for a well site, sketching plans on the back of an old feed sack. We dig trenches, and install panels. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, technical glitches, skepticism from neighbors, and more threats from the HOA. The first pump we tried burned out. The second one leaked. But every time something broke, we fixed it. Every time someone doubted, we kept going. Wife in one of the interview. I thought he was crazy at first. But then I saw how determined he was. And when the first trickle of water came out of that pump, I knew he was onto something. The first successful test. Water gushes from a spigot, spraying into the air. I and Curtis cheer, high-fiving. The kids run through the spray, laughing. It wasn't just water. It was hope. It was proof that we didn't have to depend on the HOA for everything. That we could take care of ourselves. Word spreads. Neighbors peek over fences, curious. Some stop by to ask questions. Others offer to help. Earlene brings lemonade and a folder of HOA bylaws, just in case. The mood shifts from suspicion to cautious optimism. But Karen wasn't happy. She tried to cite me for code violations, sent more letters, even threatened legal action. She said the solar pump was an unauthorized structure. That it violated the aesthetic standards of the neighborhood. I told her, if you want to talk about aesthetics, let's talk about those plastic flamingos on your lawn. She didn't think it was funny. A tense HOA meeting. Karen glares at me across the table. The room is packed with neighbors, some angry, some supportive. Erlene sits quietly, taking notes. Karen. We have rules for a reason. If we let one person break them, where does it end? I wasn't breaking the rules. I was following them better than anyone. The bylaws said nothing about solar pumps. And if they wanted to change the rules, they'd have to do it in the open. More letters arrive. Fines stack up. I keep meticulous records, photos, receipts, copies of every interaction. I started a new folder labeled Evidence. I wasn't alone anymore. My neighbors started asking questions. Some came to help. Others wanted to know if they could tap into my new system. The HOA tried to scare us, but the more they pushed, the more we pushed back. Neighbors gather in my backyard, sitting on lawn chairs, passing around lemonade and blueprints. Curtis explains how the system works. Erlene reads from the bylaws, showing where the HOA has overstepped. Neighbor 1. I never thought about where our water came from. But when it stopped, I realized how much control they had over us. Neighbor 2. Wade's system gave us options. It gave us a voice. Whistleblower. I worked with the HOA for years. I saw the water bills. I saw the siphoning. They were diverting water for their own use, watering the common areas, filling private pools, while the rest of us got rationed. We discovered the HOA was siphoning water for their own use, while the rest of us suffered. It was right there, in the records. But nobody wanted to talk about it. At a tense HOA meeting, I presented my evidence. Erlene backs me up. The room buzzes with whispers and gasps. Karen tries to regain control, but the tide is turning. We brought the evidence to the next meeting. The board tried to shut us down, but the neighbors wouldn't have it. People started speaking up, about unfair fines, about favoritism, about the water. It was the first time I'd seen the community really come together. The solar pump is running strong. Neighbors filling buckets, watering gardens, sharing stories. I and Curtis tweaked the system, making improvements. The mood is hopeful, determined. We weren't just fighting for water anymore. We were fighting for our right to live without fear, to take care of each other, to stand up to those who thought they could control us. I didn't set out to start a revolution. I just wanted to water my garden. But sometimes, all it takes is a little pressure to find out what you're really made of. The community festival was always the highlight of the year. After everything we'd been through, folks were ready for a little normalcy, a chance to celebrate, to let the kids run wild, to remember what it felt like to be neighbors, not adversaries. The festival is in full swing. Suddenly, a commotion at the main water station. The crowd gathers as frustrated volunteers shake their heads. No water is coming from the taps. The HOA's system has failed. Neighbor 1. I couldn't believe it. One day we needed water the most, and the HOA system just gave up. People started looking around, wondering what to do. But our solar pump kept working. While the official water station was bone dry, our spigots were flowing. We filled buckets, set up sprinklers for the kids, even kept the food stalls running. For the first time, the whole neighborhood saw what we'd built, and what was possible when we worked together. Neighbor 2. I always thought Wade was a little stubborn, but today he saved the festival. I'm just glad he didn't give up. Erlene. The truth came out. People realized the HOA had been holding us back, not helping us. By the end of the day, folks were talking about change, real change. What started as a fight for my own rights became something bigger, a movement for fairness and sustainability. I saw neighbors who'd barely spoken to each other come together, sharing ideas, helping out, dreaming up new projects. Berlin. We overhauled the HOA. We rewrote the bylaws to support innovation and fairness. We made the solar pump a model for the whole neighborhood. And we made sure everyone had a voice, not just the loudest ones. This experience taught me the power of resilience, innovation, and standing up for what's right. When we come together, we can turn adversity into opportunity. We can build something better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. Neighbor 3. I used to be afraid to speak up. Now I know my voice matters. We all do. Curtis. Who would have thought? A little sunlight, a little stubbornness, and a whole lot of neighborly love. That's all it took. We didn't just fix a water problem. We fixed our community. And if you're watching this, remember, you can, too. If you're facing injustice in your community, don't give up. I know it's hard. I know how it feels to stand alone, to wonder if anyone else sees what you see, to question if it's even worth the fight. But let me tell you, there are solutions. Sometimes you just have to build them yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to your neighbors. You'd be surprised who's willing to help when you take that first step. Whether it's water, power, or just a fair say in how things are run, there are ways to take back control, to make things better for everyone. We didn't have a big budget, or fancy degrees, or political power. What we had was determination, a little bit of know-how, and the willingness to work together. That's all it took to change everything. This is more than my story, it's a call for justice, for innovation, and for standing together in the face of adversity. Whether you're in a small town, a big city, or anywhere in between, you have the power to make a difference. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for believing in what's possible when we refuse to back down. And thank you for being the kind of neighbor who makes the world a little brighter, a little fairer, and a whole lot stronger.